Okay, this is going to be an instructional video on how to do the Bootstrap grid game by yourself. So you will have downloaded the Bootstrap grid game zip file, and inside you'll see the contents. So the first thing you want to do is obviously open this up in Atom. And you'll see all the stuff that's in here, but let me go back to my desktop for 1 second, or at least get my folder up. And you'll see there's also something you're going to have to open up in here called bootstrap.pdf. So I'm going to open that. Now notice that's number 3 because we're gonna come back to that in a second. Let's the first thing I want you to do is just set up the context of Bootstrap. And in this Bootstrap game, I only have it set up to use the grid system, so that's a little different than Boss Battle 2, where you'll load the entirety of Bootstrap. So, but let's just go over that together, setting up your file. So I'm obviously going to make a new file, and I'm going to call it, I'll just call it game.html. And of course I have to set up my document. Now, doesn't matter if you put in a title at this point, right? Because it's just a game. We have to have the metadata, right? So the responsive metadata is the first thing we should put in there. So my content equals, you know what? I'm just going to be lazy and cut and paste it here. I never remember this off the top of my head. There we go. Game.html, right? So this makes it responsive. We need that, absolutely, right? Then we need to link in 2 CSS files. If you notice in the CSS files, there's Bootstrap Grid and there's Bootstrap Reboot. Bootstrap Reboot is actually their version of normalize CSS that I taught you about. So you have to have that always with this, right? So I'll just go for CSS bootstrap reboot.css, and then I'm just going to need to go ahead and put in the grid. Okay, so now we have this, and now the whole premise of the game is for you to figure out how to use Bootstrap Grid. Okay, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to launch my live server. Okay, so whoops, that's the index file in case you want to see the answer to how to set up the Bootstrap file. You can actually use index.html or 01.html, and both are the exact same file. I don't know why I included both, but I'm going to go to the one I set up, which has nothing, but I have an internal server error. So what could that problem be? I'm not really sure why I have this. Let me make sure I can see other things. You probably shouldn't have this internal server error. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. Not a big deal for me for right now for showing you this game. So what you want to do is then actually, for the first 2, I'll go over the first 2 for you, and then I'll show you how to do a third, and then I'm just going to let you do it on your own. So basically, for the first one, what I want you to do is just create a simple grid. This grid is just how do you set up the grids. So go ahead and with 12, right? There's 12 columns here. It doesn't change as I make my page smaller or anything. So just pause this video right now and consider how do you set up the Bootstrap grid, and then I'm going to go over it in a second here. Okay, so if you're back, hopefully you actually paused it. Let's look at how we build a Bootstrap grid. So the first thing we want to do is we need to put some kind of a wrapper on these on your page content so that we have the space between the browser. And so for that, we would set up a div with a class of equals container. Where did you find this class? You should have went to the Bootstrap documentation to figure this out, right? Hopefully you did that. Then what we have to do is set up a row context. If we need a row to make things into, this works on Flexbox. And so if you remember, there's Flexbox parent and there's Flexbox child. So the row needs to be the parent. The container is actually what sets the maximum width of your and the centering of everything. So you need to set up a row. So div class equals row. And then after that, you can set up your columns. So each column would just be a div. Now, before I go ahead and do all 12, because that would be crazy, I'm going to go ahead and put a class on that. And so the general class is just call, and that will make this. Far better probably than just using -call is maybe to use call -1. And why -1? Well, let's look over here in this right here. So you see these things right here. This leverages all these things. So it's mobile first. So basically these things cascade this way. And we have 12 columns. We can actually think of those as units because they're not the actual columns. And so 1 is 1 unit of column. So if I want to have 12 of these, right, the simplest answer, probably the better answer than just using call, is to say call 1. And obviously then I just need to cut and paste this so that I have 12 of these. Bad boys going on here, right? So obviously I would get 12 here, hit save, and for whatever reason you see I have a server error, but it would wind up looking like this, except for it won't have these colors because I don't have, there's no other CSS. If you want to get the CSS from, say, over here, you can actually then just cut and paste this. So I'm just going to cut and paste this into my game. Right, and that'll give you all those crazy colors. Then of course you probably want to put some content in these. So I would just go ahead and just do something like this for yourself, just on this first one. And then after this you'll just be playing with these columns. So I think it should be okay, right? So right there. So right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I need 3 more. And there we go. So now this would look like if my server was working, and I don't know why it's not. I will, let me see. Oh, there it is. It's working now. Okay, so you see now it winds up looking exactly the same. So we've set up our grid right. So let's move on to number 2. And so for number 2, what we want to do is we want to go in the browser. I'm going to go in the browser to show it to you. o2.html. Okay. So now this one, you see now that all of those columns actually take up the entirety. So why don't you go ahead and pause it and see how to do that. Okay, hopefully you paused it. The difference here is, right, each of these now was call 12. So if I just add 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Save that. Go back to here, go to game.html. See, now I have it like that. And the reason for that, again, it's a 12 unit grid, right? This is what you have to understand. It's 12 units. If you add up to 12, it just goes to the next line. So it has something called flex wrap on it, if you remember from Flexbox Froggy. So the default is that it's making rows. So this is still row. It's still considered. I know there's this row thing, but you can just think of it as wrap, right? The thing's wrap. This is really a little bit confusing to understand. You'll just get the hang of it. Okay, so for number 3, you're going to turn to your and get more complex. Okay, so if you notice all these, I have these different screen views, and so we have. It'll look like this on a mobile phone. It'll look like this on a small. It'll look like this on a medium. Note the way it goes this. So now for this one, obviously, you can use just 6 columns. So I would go first to back to my thing here. I would remove 6 of these, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 of these now that I don't have to bother with 12 of them anymore because I only have 6. I think on one of these, maybe there's one that has like 5, maybe. Yeah, see, this one you'll only use 5 columns. And then the rest all have, this one you only have 3. So just be aware of how many of these there are and use the same amount of divs. So the way this is going to work is that you're going to add the columns, the classes that Bootstrap uses to do this. And so Yeah, my dog decided just to make noise. Let's look at something else that you do. You'll want to, in Chrome, bring up your Chrome inspector, and you'll want to make sure you have responsive mode toggled on. So if you do this, notice then that you will be able to grab this edge and resize your window to various sizes, because you're going to hit these breakpoints where the columns lay out differently, right? And that's based on this right here. So you see there's extra small is call dash something, small is call dash SM, right? So going through. Okay, so pause this video and try to make number 3 correct. And then when we come back, I'll explain the answer. Okay, so here's the answer to number 3. And we have to add a second class because right now it's fine. It goes 12 everywhere we want. But we want when it hits the large breakpoint, so the large breakpoint is 960, we want it to switch over so that these lay out all staying in what appears to be one row. So let me bring my screen down to like 950 real quick. And so notice the size is right here. And what we want to do in our HTML is add another class for that. So we can add multiple classes by just simply using a space between them. And so I'm going to say call large 2. And why am I going to say call large 2? Well, if you remember, our grid units are 12. At 12 they wrap. And we need them to add up to 12 and still stay without wrapping. So the math on, right, 12 divided, or yeah, you know the math. And so I'm going to go ahead and add this on to all these, save that, mosey over to my browser. Now, as soon as I hit 960, it should shift the layout. Whoops. Oh, it is now, they changed it maybe to 992 actually. So this is an old version of the, let me go back here. So they changed this to 992. Oh no, they didn't. I'm looking at this number. This is the number at which they change at. This is the max container width. I didn't notice that. So they're changing it. The breakpoints are 992. I was just misspeaking. And so at 992, right, they switch over here. So below that, they do that. Okay? So do you understand how it works? It works with breakpoints. So at various breakpoints, right, these are the breakpoints. You would use these to change it, right? Always starting with the smallest first, because if you say just call dash 12 and you don't say anything else, for all the breakpoints, it will be take up all 12 units. But as soon as I put in like a call dash medium, that overrides it at that one. And if you put like 6, then it would take up half the units, right? Conceptually, I hope you start to get this. So I'm not going to go over any more, especially because I'm not doing a very good job of explaining things anyhow. I want you just to go through the game and figure out which, right? So just go through this sheet and figure out how to code so that it lays out like this in your browser, right? And that will really teach you how Bootstrap works and how its grid system works.